Breaking news. President Donald Trump is now openly linking U.S. demands over Greenland to a Nobel Peace Prize grievance, directly in a message to Norway's prime minister. Let that sink in. A geopolitical pressure campaign paired with personal prestige politics, wrapped into one explosive text exchange. And here's the question. When national security rhetoric gets fused with personal recognition, who pays the price? America, our allies, or global stability? Tonight, we're digging into three major points. First, what Trump actually said in that message and why it's already reverberating across NATO. Second, how tariff threats and territorial demands collide with international law and alliance credibility. And third, the real-world economic blowback, because when leaders gamble with diplomatic fire, it's workers, small businesses, and markets that get burned. But here's the kicker. This isn't just rhetoric, it's policy pressure in real time. Here's what just happened in plain terms. Trump sent a message to Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre, saying he no longer feels obligated to think purely of peace because Norway decided not to give him the Nobel Peace Prize, then pivoted immediately into his demand for complete and total control of Greenland. This wasn't a vague comment at a rally. It was a direct diplomatic exchange, confirmed by Støre's office. The timestamp matters. Trump's text was reportedly sent at 4:15 p.m. Norway time, 10:15 a.m. ET, after Støre, together with Finland's President Alexander Stubb, had urged Trump to de-escalate and proposed a call, and it gets worse. Trump's message included two key escalations. One, he framed Greenland as essential for global security, stating, "The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland." Two, he repeated the claim that he stopped 8 wars plus, using that as justification for his Nobel grievance. Meanwhile, this is happening alongside tariff threats aimed at allies. According to reporting, Trump has discussed imposing a 10% tariff on goods from multiple NATO partners, with the threat of escalation to 25% by June if they oppose his Greenland push. To humanize this, imagine you run a mid-sized U.S. manufacturing company that imports specialized components from Northern Europe, precision parts you can't easily replace overnight. A sudden 10% tariff isn't politics. It's layoffs, delayed orders, and broken contracts. And that ripple doesn't stay overseas. It lands in American payrolls. So the core issue is this. A territorial demand is being tied to personal grievance while tariffs are being used as leverage against allies. And that combination is combustible. To understand why this matters, you have to separate three different layers that are now being mashed together. Nobel Prize politics, Greenland's legal status, and tariffs as coercive diplomacy. First, the Nobel Peace Prize point. The Nobel Peace Prize is awarded by an independent committee, not the Norwegian government. Støre reportedly explained this directly in his response. That's not trivia. It's the crux of why this message alarms analysts. Because Trump's framing, "your country decided not to give me the prize," treats a civil society decision as state policy. That's how diplomatic disputes get manufactured out of misunderstandings or political narratives. So why link it to Greenland? Because Greenland is being positioned as the ultimate security asset. It's a sparsely populated Arctic territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, often described as resource-rich and strategically located. It matters for early warning systems and monitoring Arctic routes. That part is not inherently controversial. Arctic security is real. The controversy is the leap from strategic importance to complete and total control. And here's the kicker. Trump's message reportedly questions Denmark's ownership by saying there are no written documents, arguing it's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, adding, "We had boats landing there also." That's not how sovereignty works in modern international law, and analysts warn that normalizing that logic is dangerous. If territorial claims become "we were there too," then the entire post-World War II legal order starts to look optional. now layer in tariffs. Tariffs are typically used for trade disputes, market access, dumping, subsidies. Here, tariffs are being discussed as a pressure tool to force alignment on a territorial demand. That's a shift in mechanism, from economic policy to geopolitical coercion. Think of it like using your household mortgage payment as leverage in a family argument. Sure, you can do it, but the damage doesn't stay in the argument. It hits the roof over everyone's head. We also have hard details emerging from reporting. Trump has floated a 10% tariff beginning in February, with threats to raise it to 25% by June, aimed at allies who resist the Greenland approach. Why is that strategically risky? Because the United States doesn't operate alone in the Arctic. NATO coordination matters. Denmark is a NATO member. Norway is a NATO member. Finland is now central to NATO's northern posture. Turning allied coordination into a tariff standoff undermines joint deterrence and invites countermoves. And we're already seeing political pushback. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer publicly stated that Greenland's future belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone, and called tariff use against allies wrong. History gives us a warning here. In previous eras, major powers used economic tools, blockades, punitive trade restrictions, to force smaller states into compliance. That often didn't create stability. It created hardened alliances against the coercer. The lesson: coercion can deliver short-term wins, but it often produces long-term strategic isolation, and it gets worse. There's also the 8 wars claim. The White House has listed conflicts it says were addressed, but reporting notes disputes about whether several of those situations qualify as wars, whether fighting actually ended, or whether agreements held. The larger point isn't the label, it's the use of the claim as justification for changing posture away from peace. So here's the direct cause and effect chain analysts are watching: personal grievance, escalatory messaging, allied backlash, tariff retaliation risk, market uncertainty, economic pain at home. And that's the reality. Foreign policy doesn't stay foreign. It becomes shipping costs, price tags, and jobs. Let's break down who's affected, because this isn't a cable news debate. This is a supply chain and alliance shock with real consequences. If tariffs hit European imports broadly, everyday costs rise in quiet but brutal ways. Example 1. A U.S. auto repair shop sourcing specialized European components, brake systems, sensors, electronics, faces immediate price jumps. That cost gets passed to families, turning routine car maintenance into a budget crisis. Example 2. Construction and infrastructure. Many contractors rely on imported equipment parts and specialty tools. A 10% increase compounds fast, especially on large projects where margins are tight. Example 3. Grocery and household goods. Even if the tariff targets specific countries, freight routes and distributor pricing adjust across the board. Inflation doesn't need a headline to hit a household, it just shows up at checkout. So ask yourself, if the policy goal is leverage overseas, why is the bill showing up in American kitchens? Picture a small U.S. outdoor gear retailer that imports high-end cold weather equipment, insulated materials, technical fabrics produced in Northern Europe. A sudden 10% tariff destroys planned pricing. The retailer either raises prices and loses customers, or eats the cost and risks closure. And here's the kicker: they can't simply switch suppliers overnight. Contracts, quality standards, and lead times don't change because a politician sends a text message. Publicly traded companies hate uncertainty. Even the threat of escalation from 10% to 25% by June forces corporations to model worst-case scenarios: inventory rushes, rerouted shipping, and delayed investments. Analysts often warn that tariff volatility functions like a hidden tax on planning. Companies reduce expansion, freeze hiring, or raise prices preemptively. Norway's Sture publicly reaffirmed that the Nobel Prize decision is made by an independent committee, not his government, already indicating the tension here. Denmark and Greenland have also been moving on security coordination. Officials are meeting NATO leadership, and allies have discussed increased military presence and exercises in the region. Experts warn the risk is a split-screen crisis. On one side, NATO tries to project unity in the Arctic. On the other, tariffs and territorial demands create distrust inside the alliance. So what happens next? What if European partners respond with counter tariffs? U.S. exporters get hit, especially agriculture, industrial machinery, and specialized manufacturing. The ripple effect becomes a cycle: retaliation, escalation, price spikes, voter anger, further political volatility. And it gets worse, because once trust collapses, it's not easy to rebuild, even after markets stabilize. Let's focus on what was actually said, because words matter when they come from the Oval Office. Trump's message reportedly states, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace." He then adds, "The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland." And he closes with an alliance demand. "I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States." Legally and politically, the implications are serious. Greenland's status is tied to Denmark and Greenlandic self-determination. Allies have already signaled that tariff coercion is unacceptable, with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer calling tariffs against allies wrong and reaffirming Greenland's decision belongs to Greenland and Denmark. Short term, next 30 to 90 days, analysts expect intensified diplomatic calls inside NATO to prevent escalation, increased market sensitivity to tariff deadlines, and a surge in political messaging from European leaders emphasizing sovereignty and alliance norms. Medium term, 6 to 12 months, one plausible scenario is a hardened European stance, tighter coordination on Arctic security without U.S. ownership framing, paired with contingency planning for trade disruptions. If tariffs expand, it could lock in a semi-permanent new normal of higher costs and lower trust. And here's the question that should bother every voter. If alliance cohesion is a national security asset, why spend it like loose change? Let's recap the 3 critical points. First, Trump's message links a Nobel Peace Prize grievance directly to a renewed demand for complete and total control of Greenland. Second, tariff threats reported at 10% with escalation to 25% by June turn economic policy into coercion against allies, risking retaliation and domestic price pain. Third, the fallout doesn't stay diplomatic. It hits supply chains, small businesses, and families fast. Key takeaway: when leaders blur the line between personal validation and national strategy, accountability becomes non-negotiable. So here's my question for you. Is this a negotiating tactic or the start of a dangerous new playbook? If you want to stay informed on stories the mainstream media won't fully cover, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell icon. Final thought: alliances are built over decades and can be weakened in a single message. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.